back, and I'll try to keep it moving here. It's the first time I've worn a flower since I was in the Marine Corps. So thank you so much. It's an honor to be invited to speak tonight. I'm one of several Moffetts who've been to Groveton High School. We heard earlier that the first class was 1899. My grandfather, Irving, was in the class of 1900.
Wow.
Chandler Matthews, who helped to found this organization, his mother was in the class of 1899. Or was it Chandler himself? I don't know. Anyway, I'm just thinking today my dad moving in with Chandler's mother, wherever Groveton High School was back then. So anyway, my dad graduated in 1944, grew up on Preble Street, where he could look out the window and see the high school, and also the sports field. And some wonderful baseball action happened on that field, some of you know. Famously, Jim Thorpe and some ringers came to Groveton one time, and the Groveton baseball guys beat him. Honey Beaton, some of you know Honey Beaton had a home run that went on top of the high school, famously. So anyway, I looked through my dad's 1944 seniority yearbook before coming up here. They had a sports section in there, of course. And I was struck by what I saw. My dad was a big basketball guy, as some of you may know, and they played in a little gym which later became the shop and later the library. I don't know how they had a gym in there, but obviously it was a snake pit. And so my dad's senior year, as I looked in the yearbook, Berlin came to play Groveton. And at halftime, the score was 22-0, Groveton at halftime. And the final score is 34-12. So Berlin was good back then. The Labman twins played at one time for Berlin. The Labmans who founded this place, the TNC. So anyway, teams must have hated playing in Groveton. So my folks later built a house on North Avenue. Some of you have been there, of course, where we could also see the school, like my dad, grew up looking at the school, and so did I and my family. And back when we moved to North Avenue, there were houses on Pleasant Street, including the Leclerc House and the Russo House. Where is Shirley? Yeah, I talked to Shirley earlier. I remember when I was like 4 years old looking over at the high school, and Shirley's house was on fire. It was horrible. That's not that funny. So Shirley was, I asked about that. This is like probably 1959-ish. And Shirley said her mother sent her to pull the fire alarm by the Emery's house, and Shirley said she was too short to pull the alarm, and it sounded horrible. But I always remember that fire, Shirley, and thank God nobody made it. So anyway, next to Shirley's house was the Leclerc house, Alfreda Leclerc. Shirley shaking her head. So, believe it or not, I got into trouble with poor old Alfreda Leclerc. Is that Shirley laughing? Yeah. So, I was often getting into trouble. So, anyway, so I lived right by the school, and kids who lived on took the Stark bus, the Stratford bus, the Guildhall bus, and the Lost Nation bus would get to school on time. And I lived right by school, and I'd have to hustle to be there on time. And sometimes I cut across Alfreda's lawn. Yeah, it's true. And then you all remember Mrs. Roden, her voice would come on the intercom. Would Michael Moffett report to the principal's office immediately? And so I'd go and sit outside the office until Mr. Bouchard was ready. And then he'd get all puffed up and red-faced and say, Mrs. Leclerc called again. Are you ever going to stay off for a lawn? And so anyway, some will remember Mr. Bouchard's first year in Groveton. Mr. Maddie's going to have a first year in Groveton, I'm just learning. So he took no prisoners, Mr. Bouchard. And some of you remember. So anyway, this was before we had a cafeteria in high school, so the high school kids would go to the elementary school for lunch. And Mr. Bouchard had this rule that you couldn't use your car at noontime. A lot of people drove to the school, couldn't use your car. So anyway, that November I got my license, and so like the next day, I was at lunch at my house, and my dad needed something to go to the post office, so I said, Dad, I'll drive it to the post office for you. He said, oh, sure, go ahead. So I drive right past Groveton High School. Everybody's out. I'm waving. I'm probably trying to impress the cheerleaders or whatever. And I get back home and I walk to school after lunch. And then Mrs. Roden's voice comes on the intercom. Michael Moffett to the principal's office immediately. Mr. Bouchard was very, very mad. He was all puffed up and red-faced. He said, "Who do you think you are? Detention tomorrow night." And I said, "Well, I thought I could drive from home, Mr. Bouchard. I had to mail a letter from my dad." "So you don't think the rules apply to you, young man? You think you're special? You report for detention tomorrow night." "But Mr. Bouchard, we have a basketball scrimmage tomorrow down in Alton." Correct me, I may not remember. And Mr. Bailey was there, but Mr. Bouchard didn't even matter. He said, "I don't care if we have a scrimmage, we do nothing special for basketball players or athletes around here." Mr. Bailey was not happy, but he just stood there shaking his head. But then I had an idea. "Mr. Bouchard, I have an idea. And what might that be, young man? How about if I do 2 detentions instead of 1, but you let me play in the basketball scrimmage?" Mr. Bouchard didn't even matter. "What do you think this is, the Let's Make a Deal show?" But then Mr. Bailey, the basketball coach, spoke up. He wanted to play in scrimmage. He said, "Mr. Bouchard, I think Michael's onto something here. If he does 2 detentions instead of 1, that shows that basketball players don't get special. In fact, they're held to a higher standard. He's going to do 2 detentions." So after Mr. Bailey said that, Mr. Bouchard said, "Okay, you can play in the scrimmage on Thursday, but then you got to do detention on Friday and Monday." But there was a new problem, because we also had a scrimmage on Monday. So I pointed that out, and Mr. Bouchard said, "Fine, you can play in the scrimmage on Monday and then do detention Tuesday and Wednesday." So I'm up to 4 detentions. And I did all 4, and I played in both scrimmages. So anyway, now that I'm a lawmaker, and I know a little bit about law, I think that I was screwed. I was home on my own time, and my dad asked me to go to the post office, and I ended up with 4 detentions. But God bless Mr. Bouchard. Now, years later, Mr. Bouchard hired me to teach history at Groveton. Some of you know I have a couple of former students here. There's one of them back there. Thank you for that. And so when he hired me, I expected him to bring up all the detentions he gave me, but he did not. The only thing he said was, "If you're going to teach you, stay the hell off Alfreda's lawn." So anyway, so Groveton sports memories. We had some great games here in Gorham. Some of you guys remember. Against the Huskies, we beat them pretty good. Groveton came here, had a battle. Gym was packed, senior year. Foul trouble early for me. Foul. Harry Heifel was the ref, and some of you remember Harry. And then I got whacked in the face. Harry didn't call anything, so I yelled at Harry to blow his freaking whistle. Except I didn't use the word freaking. And so Harry did blow his freaking whistle and gave me a technical foul. And so Fred Bailey pulled me out, set me down for the half. Started the second half, bang, 2 more fouls, I'm out. And then I told Harry to kiss my butt. And only I didn't say butt. This is here in Gorham, so what made me think of it. So anyway, so now I'm fouled out. The gym's packed. Everybody's pointing at me, going crazy, laughing and yelling, and it's horrible. And so I'll never forget this. I'm walking to the bench, I fouled out, and this guy standing up behind the bench, behind the Groveton bench, stands up and is pointing at me and says, "Moffett, you're nothing but a big crybaby." And that was my dad. So, anyway, Bobby Young was not here. Bobby made 4 foul shots the last night we won the game, thank goodness. So anyway, moving right along, Groveton sports memories mostly good. I went to UNH out of Groveton. Groveton prepared me very well for college. And played JV soccer. Wanted to play basketball, but I quickly figured out that wasn't going to happen at UNH, so I transferred to Plymouth. Had to sit out a year. I was excited about trying out for the college team. I was a sports guy, basketball guy. There's like 40 guys trying out. Of course, everybody else is from a bigger school, like Concord, Pinkerton, Groveton, Mount Vernon, New York. So one guy asked me, he says, "Hey you, Moffett, where the hell is Groveton? It's in Canada or something?" And he said, "That's in Class S." And we know what Class S stands for. And he said a four-letter word, which tipped me off. So it just made me determined to make the team, which I did. I was never much of a shooter. I could run, jump, and rebound. And eventually became team captain. Very proud of that at Plymouth. Somehow scored over 1,000 points and still hold the Plymouth State single season rebound record. Thank you. So somebody from the little school, I'm very proud that I did okay. So somebody down at Plymouth asked me, I really could offensive rebound, got a lot of points that way. So somebody asked me, he said, "How did you become such a great rebounder coming from a little school like Groveton?" And I explained that I'm going to be brutally honest. When I played at Groveton High School, I played with a bunch of gunners. And was he supposed to laugh at that? But to be clear, some of my teammates are here tonight. Kirk Young was not a gunner. Larry Purcell, not a gunner. Curtis Collins, not a gunner. Dana Ladd is here tonight too. And actually, Dana was a wonderful teammate. I'll never forget, he dropped in 38 points down at Newfound. Dana, Curtis remembers. Anyway, so speaking of the lads, there were quite a few of them, including Carl. Carl's not here, but husband to Michelle. Well, Michelle's not here either. She's on our board. And Carl was one of my civics students at Groveton, and wonderful young man. Later became a doctor lab and superintendent, and then a lobbyist for the School Administrators Association. So anyway, I was in the legislature on House Education Committee. Sometimes Carl, Dr. Ladd would come in and testify. Very impressive guy. Our chair, and Muriel knows this, Rick Ladd, another Ladd from Haverhill, got a kick out of Carl and I both came from Groveton, this little school. And so more than one person would come up to me and say, "Representative Moffett, so Dr. Ladd was your teacher in high school?" I said, "No, I was his teacher in high school." But Carl had such a great presence, and such a great speaker. So anyway, I had a civics bill at a House Education Committee hearing 2 years ago, and I saw Dr. Ladd was going to testify. I said, "Oh great, good old Carl, my former civics student, he'll speak up for my bill." So Carl started his testimony. He acknowledged me and said that he enjoyed my class, and then he opposed my bill. It's true. Isn't it a video there? Okay, so anyway, Carl, God bless him, opposed my bill. But eventually that bill did become law, and which is not easy if you know anything about civics. I've had many, Representative Hall is here somewhere. A bunch of my bills get stuck in Education Committee this year. What are you going to do? But when you get a win, you get a win. So now every single high school graduate in New Hampshire to graduate from high school has to pass the 128 question naturalization test. So all these young New Hampshire people who graduate more knowledgeable because of that bill. So anyway, God bless everyone. Mallory is here tonight. She just gave me a gift. Mallory, last year's Social Studies Teacher of the Year.
Yeah.
Maybe familiar with my new law. I don't know if she supports it. I probably don't want to know, but she was terrific. And she and the Groveton kids were at the governor's State of the State speech in January, which was so great. The governor was giving a speech and he gives a shout out up to the gallery, to Mallory and the Groveton kids. It's just wonderful. Very, very proud of Mallory and all of them. So, and by the way, we have Muriel's here tonight. Mona's sister and some other sisters. He has a lot of colleagues out there. God bless them. Have them all. And it is so cool to see Representative Hall at the State House. I think she cancels out my votes from time to time. God bless everyone. So anyway, a few more things. Groveton. So I went back to teach at Groveton. They asked me to coach the junior high basketball team, $200 back in the day, and we won our local league. But we had a game in Whitefield that people decades later still talk about. Some of you might know what's coming here. The refs were really screwing us. It wasn't Harry Heichel, I think it was Rudy Urban maybe this time, I can't remember for sure, but bad call after bad call. So finally I couldn't take it anymore. Ken, you remember Bobby Knight? I grabbed a chair, not proud of it, threw the chair across the court, and bounced all over the place. One of the 8th graders from Whitefield was a guy named Jeff Woodburn, who later became a state senator, and Jeff later claimed he was almost killed when he threw the chair on the court. So anyway, yes, I got technical, deserved it. So I was often getting in trouble. So the next day, I'm teaching at Groveton, and Mrs. Roden comes on the intercom with Mr. Moffett report to the principal's office. So even though I was then a teacher, I'm sure this never happened here, I'm sure. I knew it was coming, so I walk in and Mr. Bouchard, so now I'm teaching at Groveton. Bouchard still calling me into his office. Mr. Moffett, I just got a call from the Whitefield principal. Mr. Bouchard, I'm not surprised, I plead guilty, I was wrong. And so Mr. Bouchard stared at me for a while, and then he gave me a little wink, and he said, I didn't like the Whitefield principal's attitude. So just don't do it again, carry on. So, I was surprised that Mr. Bouchard gave me a break. I was ready for another detention. But then I figured out later, maybe he gave me a break because he was afraid I'd throw a chair at him. Who knows? Mike Chadwick, so you know Mike, class of '69, he later was principal at Whitefield, and he said they had that chair in the trophy case at Whitefield. I think he was kidding, Mike Chadwick, neighbor on Pleasant Street. So anyway, we'll head down the home stretch here, but still on the topic of basketball, many of you remember the Robertson family. Where's Nancy? I just talked to Nancy Robertson, was class of '68. There she is, waiting. And her mom, Helen, some of you know, was a home ec teacher for years in Groveton. And her twin brothers, John and Jamie, some of you remember, I know you do, were in our class 73, through the 8th grade, and then they moved to, Nancy did graduate from here, but John and Jamie and Helen moved to Manchester. So John became like the best basketball player in New Hampshire. True. He led Manchester West to the state title in 1973. He was like athlete of the month, athlete of the year. Amazing, wonderful basketball player John was. If he'd stayed in Groveton, he might have won Class S. Anyway, I saw John last week and we golfed at Lockmere. He and Charlene golfed for a little while. Couldn't stay around for this. He said to say hi to everybody. Nancy golfed some of the course with us. So John always tells me he loved growing up in Groveton. He moved to Manchester, but his heart always stayed in Groveton. So he asked me, I said, "Can you come to the banquet?" And he said, "I'd love to, but I got to get back to South Carolina." So he said, "Who's going to be there?" So John Potter, there's John. John had sent me a list, and you heard Robin earlier, it was like 13 of us. So I told John, from what John Robertson from what John Potter had sent, some of the names of some of the people that are going to be here. And so then John said, "Well, those are great people." He said, "I kissed at least 3 of those girls in the 8th grade." And which I was, I never kissed anybody until I was almost a senior. So and John said, "So who's there again?" And I told him the names, and he said, "Actually, 4. So, I don't know who the 4 are, but maybe tonight, before the night ends, we'll know who they were. So So my excellent Groveton education set me up for success in college, grad school, sports, life, even politics, as I mentioned. And finally, I do want to mention, closing out here, the military. When I was teaching in Groveton, I used to go to the Legion. Who didn't? Mr. Ginesky would always be at the Legion. And my dad was a member. And at the time, I never thought I'd be a veteran. They did away with the draft in '73, just before we graduated. And by the way, they also lowered the drinking age to 18, 2 weeks before our graduation. Timing is everything. So anyway, my late brother John was in the Marines. He actually got married. Reception was right here back in 1980 in this room. So I met his Marine friends at the reception here. And I just was so impressed with these guys. They were fit, and they were tight, and they were cocky, and I said, wow, I like those guys. So John told me to go talk to a recruiter, get a brochure, and I said, I was teaching at Trinity in Manchester. So I went to get a brochure, walked in for a brochure, walked out having signed up for the Marines. They must have seen me coming. So anyway, great experience in the Marines, and one of the best things I ever did. I did 3 years in active duty and get out, and then I was SID, Sports Information Director at Plymouth State. And this job, Marine Corps Reserve job, opened up in Maine, a Reserve Command billet that I really qualified for. So I asked my boss at Plymouth State, I said, Mr. Clark, can I look at this opportunity? He was kind of concerned. We had stuff on weekends, and I explained it's only 1 week in a month. And he said, you're not going to go to any wars, right? And I said, well, this is 1990, pieces breaking out all over. So of course, within a year, me and my men, we dug in on the Kuwait border, waiting to attack Saddam Hussein's Iraqi forces. We soon were going through enemy minefields into burning oil well fields with Scud missiles flying overhead, Desert Storm. But it ended pretty quickly, and thank heavens. And so we ended up taking a bunch of Iraqis prisoner. And we had, by the way, we went through Kuwait City after the ceasefire. Heroes, it was like the liberation of Paris. Unbelievable. Never dreamed that a Groveton grad like me would be like in that position. So anyway, we did take all these prisoners. So my men were searching some of these Iraqi prisoners, and we came across this one guy, this Iraqi guy who spoke English. And he said, hey, I was going to school in LA, California, and I didn't want to be here. I came home on break. They threw me in the Army. He said, I hate Saddam. I love Bush. I'm glad you guys are here. He said, look, I'm even a Lakers fan on, Lakers t-shirt under his uniform. He said, look, I'm even a Lakers fan. Now, our reserve battalion was made up of New Englanders, all New Englanders. One of my men, Corporal Townsend, raised his M16 ever so slightly, and he said, you're a Lakers fan? We're Marines and we're Celtics fans, and you're in big trouble. So in the Iraqi army, they'd shoot people for anything. So this guy quickly said, I like the Lakers, but Larry Bird's my favorite player. So we always remembered that. So I did want to, finishing up here, mention that there was a military piece to my journey as well. And thank you, Groveton High School, for that. So having closing out here with a little bit about the military, because as I mentioned before I came up here, I looked at my dad's 1944 yearbook, and that seniorian had 2 full pages of names of Groveton people, some of you know what I'm talking about, who were at war in 1944 when my dad graduated. 2 full pages, dozens of Groveton men, mostly, at war. And in that seniorian, Carolyn Boucher, I think she married an Emily, Carolyn Boucher, in my dad's class, next to all these dozens and dozens of names of Groveton guys in war, I quote what Carolyn wrote, scattered on battlefronts all over the world today are our Groveton boys. Many former athletes, champs who exchanged bright purple jackets for khaki or navy blue, and who are now fighting the greatest game of their lives on Uncle Sam's team. And we know that with all of these Groveton boys in the fight, that our school, our town, in our country will not perish from the earth, unquote. So from Carolyn Boucher, and that was 1944. That didn't even include my dad's class. My dad went in the Navy. In 1945, a whole bunch more Groveton guys went into the service in the uniform. So not bad for a little Coos County mill town that was also home to a wonderful little high school amid the gleaming northern snow and beneath the pilot wings. I'll always be very, very proud of being a Groveton grad. Honored to get to say a few words tonight, and thank you all for that. Have a great rest of the evening.